I'm Charles Reed, President and CEO of Get Payroll. I have with me a special guest today, Mason Duchatschek from AMO, and he's here to discuss some things with me, and we're going to talk about employee selection, engagement, and retention today. Mason, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Mason Duchatschek, and I am an Amazon.com #1 best-selling author. I've written 9 different books on topics related to employee selection, development, and productivity, and have been in this business since the early 90s and worked with small family businesses all the way to companies that do $6-7 billion a year. So it's a real pleasure to be here and looking forward to spending time with you. Thank you for inviting me.
How much does a single, let alone a series of hiring mistakes, cost a company?
Very interesting you should ask that. I could respond in different ways. If it's a company with salespeople, I could ask you, what's the difference between your top performer and your worst performer, and how many times can you afford to make that wrong choice? If you want the statistical type answer, studies are showing that the cost to replace hourly employees are about 16% of their annual salary. When you start talking about professional level employees, technicians, salespeople, managers, it's usually about 21% of their annual salary.
Okay.
When you start talking about executives, that's usually between 150 and 213% of their salary to replace them.
Wow, that's a lot. So, what separates those who succeed from those who struggle in the workforce that you hire?
2 things. Number one, how they match the job and how they match their supervisor. Specifically, as it relates to how they match their job, typically 3 things separate those who succeed from those who struggle. Number one is skill. In other words, can someone do the job? Typically, do they have basic math, vocabulary, problem-solving skills, etc. When you start talking about attitude and values, that's a measure of will someone do the job and why. Someone can have all the skill in the world, but if they don't have work ethic, they're not
Right.
reliable, they don't show up, that skill is of no value to you as an employer. So I want to know, will they do the job and why? And then the third is behavior. And that's a measure of how someone does the job. If the job requires someone who's very extroverted and they're not, the job's asking them to come to work every day and be something they're not, and the long-term probability of them succeeding in a position that asks them to come to work every day and be something they're not very high as far as probability of success. Or worse, they actually don't leave, they stay, and they make everyone else as miserable as they are.
Yeah, sometimes the best thing is firing the right people, not
Yes.
hiring the right
Hire in haste and repent in your leisure.
people. Yes. What is the most important thing in matching a person to the job?
Well, I think, again, it boils down to skill, attitude, and values, and behavior. How do they match the job, and then how do they match the supervisor too? Because you think about it.
Okay.
There's that old saying that people don't always quit their job; they quit their supervisor. I'd ask you to reflect on a couple questions. Number one, have you ever been mismanaged?
Yes.
What was your productivity like during that period of time?
It went downhill.
And did the person who mismanaged you make any effort to fix it?
It just made it worse.
There you go. So, you may have been a perfect fit for the job. You might have the skill,
I
the
thought
attitude,
so.
the value, perfect, but you weren't a good match for that supervisor.
No.
And a lot of times you see people, you'll start looking at things like the discretionary effort of employees. And you've probably seen the Gallup surveys out there on employee engagement. You've got people that are sleepwalking through the day, doing enough not to get fired, operating at half speed. Well, if your company's payroll annually is $5 million and you got people operating at half speed, you're paying $5 million for $2.5 million worth of labor.
Right.
Why is that? Well, again, getting the right people and matching the jobs and matching the supervisors, the payoffs are good if you can figure out how to do it right.
What's the most important thing a business can do to maximize the potential for success?
You know what? There was a book that came out in 2000 or 2001 called Good to Great,
Okay.
and the author's a guy named Collins.
It's on my shelf.
And he talked about the importance of getting the right people on the bus, of course, being your business, and into the right seats. I think he was right then, and I think he's right now. The challenge is most companies don't know how to do that.
Agreed.
And the book didn't tell companies how to do that. I have a 4-step process to help companies do that. The first one starts with taking inventory of who you have if you're an employer. I would administer a personality plus behavioral assessment to every one of your current employees.
Mm-hmm.
So I can give you an inventory of who you have on your bus, behaviorally speaking.
Right.
Second thing I want to know is what the seats look like. Well, I can take that data. You can say, hey, here are my top salespeople, here are my top managers, here's my top technicians, here's my top customer service. And we can reverse engineer exactly how organized, how sensitive, how flexible, how assertive, how competitive, et cetera, behaviorally speaking, those folks are. So we know what each of those seats on your bus look like. Okay. So now as an employer, you have inventory of who's on your bus, and you know what the seats look like by statistically replicating the patterns of success for your company and your culture based on your own top performers. Mm-hmm. So you're eliminating the guesswork.
Right.
So now you know who's on your bus, you know what the seats look like. You need a system to manage them. Well, we have an online, web-based, cloud-based system that allows you to do what-if scenarios and match people to the jobs so you can put the right people in the right seats. Because it's not enough just to have the right people, you got them in the right seats.
Right.
And then obviously we provide the web-based, step-by-step video training that everyone can use to learn how to match those people to those seats. But that, if you're going to ask me what's the most important thing, the ability to match, just like Colin said, right people, right seats. But unfortunately, most folks don't know how to do it. And I wrote in my book, I did have a book out, People Matter Most, and the second half of that book is committed to explaining what I just explained to you in more detail.
How do you match the seats and the people? How do you do it?
With a touch of a few keystrokes. For example, if I have custom patterns of the different roles in the company, or better yet, let me give you I'll give you a story, better story. There was a large company with a little over 1,000 employees. And I asked the HR manager, we were talking about the importance of promoting from within. Mm-hmm. And I asked this HR executive, head of HR, I said, is there anybody in your company that knows your job better than you? And she was kind of hem-hawing around, like, it's okay, you don't have to be modest. She's like, no one knows my job better than me. I said, great. I said, how many positions do you have open on any given day? She's like, 20%. So we're talking over 200 positions open on any given day. I said, how long does it take you to fill the average position? She's like, about 90 days. Our employee selection process is very thorough. I said, interesting. I said, how would you feel about taking a week of vacation if everything was just left as it was? No one touched your emails, responding to phone calls, mail, just sat there. She goes, I could really use a week vacation. She thought that would be cool. I said, I get you. I said, how about 2 weeks in a row? She's like, 2 weeks would be pretty cool, but I would really be hesitant to come back after everything that we piled up. I said, how about 3 weeks? She's like, I couldn't fathom the idea of what it'd be like to be gone for 3 weeks and come back. How about 4? She couldn't, absolutely not. Like there's no way I'd want to come back. I said, but you're the most skilled, knowledgeable, capable person in your company, and you're telling me that you wouldn't want to come back to the role that you know better than anybody after being gone for 3 or 4 weeks. But 20% of the positions in your company are being filled by people that don't know how to fill out a time card, and those positions have been open for 90 days. I said, how about organizational drag there? So why did I tell you that story? I said, because promoting from within sounds great to everybody except HR. If HR feels a senior level position with a mid-level position, so that's senior level position is 1. Now they got to fill the mid-level position because they promoted someone. So that's 2 positions. So if they fill the mid-level position with someone's entry-level position, that's a 3rd one. So 1 change up top means 3 times the work. That's an issue. When you promote from externally, that's only 1 position. So HR loves that. Now here's the magic of what I was trying to get to you, is when you have a database of talent, and I can go into my database, I can say, hey, I have a sales manager position open. Who do I have in my bus that matches the sales manager position 85 or better? 90 to 100 is an excellent match for reference. 80 to 90 is a good match. 70 to 80 is a fair one. So who do I have that matches this job 85 or better? The system will pull up a list of people in your bus right now that match that sales manager's position 85 or better. Mm-hmm. Guess what? You need to fill, let's say a sales position comes on. Well, hey, we want to fill a sales position. Who do we have that matches this? And you can do in seconds what used to take months. And it's not guesswork.
Right.
It's literally, you're managing your human resource. I like to refer to it as an inventory management system on your talent.
Okay.
I have an inventory. I know what the seats look like on the bus, and I have a computer system that matches those two with a stroke. Here's an opening. Who do I have that matches that? And it's really good for like career path planning too. Let's just say I have a senior level executive who's going to be retiring, and we know it. I can start saying, hey, who are our candidates internally who might be able to fill this role? And by the way, how can we start grooming them for this role so that when that role opens up, there's no lag. They can hit the ground running and performing as well, if not better, than the person they're replacing. That's how you turn human resource information into a corporate asset. And that's how you manage data and make better decisions faster. And it's not guesswork, it's awesome. And that's how you do it.
Okay. Let's go back to the bus for a second. Once you know who's on your bus and what the seats look like, how do you avoid making the same hiring mistakes that you find you make?
Well, I would typically, that would be the next step. Like what we talked about here would be talking about taking inventory of who's on your bus currently.
Right.
We know inventory of what we have. We've used the models of your top performers to identify what roles people need to be put in. But what happens externally? I mean, when you bring someone from the outside, I would want to compare applicants to those roles so that I'm not hiring and hoping. If I know that a sales manager position looks like this, and I see the gaps between what this applicant brings to the job and what the job requires, I know that that job is asking that person to be something they're not, and long term it's not gonna fly. I want to find people who match those jobs and get to come to work and be who they are, do what they do best and like to do most, because those are the people that come to work and contribute more discretionary effort than those who hate their jobs and don't fit.
Right.
Those are the people that succeed because the job is allowing them to be who they are.
Okay. Why does employee selection seem like such a hit and miss, hire and hope kind of a process for so many companies?
Let me ask you a couple questions. Number one, using your traditional employee selection methods, have you hired some good employees?
Yes.
Question number two, using those exact same methods, have you hired people you wish you hadn't hired?
God, yes.
So what have you learned?
Not much, I'm afraid.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. So here's the thing. There was a study done by Michigan State University School of Business on predicting success in the workplace. And what it found was that pre-employment testing was the #1 predictor of future success by a 3-to-1 margin over interviews, past experience, and education. And what do most people rely on? Interviews, past experience, and education. But let's break it down. So would you agree that a decision is only as sound as the facts on which they're based?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're an interviewer, and I saw an article back in the day by Restaurants and Institutions magazine that said 72 or 73% of applications contain embellishments. I've seen articles in Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur that suggest that 1/3 of resumes are embellished. So let's shoot right down the middle for easy math and say that 50% of the information that you as an employer are getting about an applicant is embellished. The bigger challenge is which half? Yet you're still expected to conduct a meaningful interview and make a decision. But that's hard to do if the facts in which you're making those decisions are suspect at best. You can do background checks, and by the way, you should.
Right.
But background checks only show you that someone's been caught and successfully prosecuted. What about people who did things they weren't supposed to but weren't caught?
Right.
Or weren't prosecuted? Or weren't prosecuted successfully even though they did things they weren't supposed to? You could do drug tests. Well, that's great, but I like to think that is a liquid intelligence test because the sign says on your front door, hey, drug testing or testing for illegal drugs is something that's contingent upon our applicants and whatnot. So, liquid intelligence test, all they need to do is stay clean for 30 days, pass the test, and go back to whatever they're doing. Reference checks, people should do reference checks. But guess what? Not everyone's out there giving the names of people who are going to say they're lazy and irresponsible.
You only give out references of people who you know are going to give you good references.
Exactly
you
right.
Don't give out names of people who give bad references.
Now, and I'm not, and make no mistake, there's still people that you should check references because guess what? There are people that are going to tell the truth and you're going to find out. You still should do drug tests because guess what? There are people that are going to fail drug tests. I mean, you should still do these things, but I think that if you as an employer don't do everything within your power to legally gather as much job-related information as you possibly can about an applicant without checking first, it's like playing Russian roulette without checking all the chambers of the weapon first.
Right.
You got to cover your bases. So if you're going to ask me what the ideal employee selection process would look like, it will have pre-employment tests for skill, attitude, personality, behavior. It'll have background checks. It'll have drug tests. It'll have reference checks. It'll have a trial period, which, by the way, was the #2 most effective method according to the Michigan State University School of Business study on predicting success in the workplace. Trial periods were the second most effective method behind pre-employment testing. So if you want to know about how to get to do the best that you can, then your selection process should be fair, consistent, and involve all those steps.
That's interesting. That's good advice. How would you describe the ideal employee selection process that we've been talking about?
One just like I described. it contains every single step, everything within your power, every avenue that you can legally take to gather job-related information is being utilized. That's the key to it.
Okay. Now, you're obviously a fan of pre-employment testing.
Obviously.
Okay. Can't people just tell you what they want and what they want you to believe and what they think you want to hear and or exaggerate?
That's a very good question. That's a common question because they do that on interviews all the time.
Sure.
So one of the advantages of well-designed pre-employment tests are, and not all providers have this, but it's a feature called a lie scale or a distortion score, which basically means there are, for lack of a better word, trick questions built into the questionnaire to identify if someone is trying to fake good, or sometimes if they can't read and they're just checking boxes. So for example, I'll give you one. Sample question might be, true or false, I've never argued with my parents. Now, you laugh, but here's the thing. Someone who's trying to beat the test or fake good or tell you the answers that they think you want to hear, like they would in an interview, will overanalyze a question like that. And they'll sit there and think, if I admit that I would argue with my parents, they would think that I would argue with my supervisor or my customers. I don't want them to think I'm argumentative, so I'm going to say, no, I've never argued with my parents.
Well, now you know they lie.
Ding, 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 ding. Now you got it. So, and we'll give them a couple.
Yeah.
But if someone's going to sit there and say stuff like that, then we know this was a creative writing exercise. And I've had people say, well, look, they've got great results on this assessment. They look fantastic for the job. And then I see the distortion score being low, which indicates that they tried to fake good. And I'm like, but I really look at how good this is. I'm like, well, how would you feel if I gave you a resume that I copied out of the How to Get the Job of Your Dreams book, and it was all fiction, and I may look great, but would you hire me based on that resume? You're like, well, of course not. Well, there you go.
Okay. Relatively speaking, how does the importance of getting the right person in the right seats today compare to how important it was when Jim Collins first wrote the book of Good to Great so many years ago?
Well, I think it was very, very important then, and I think it's very, very important now. And more so now because the expectation is with technology and whatnot to get more work accomplished with fewer people so
Right.
that every one of those mistakes has a greater impact on the bottom line, if you ask me.
I'll buy that. We found we do more work with less people, and they are more important in each seat. Where can people go to learn more about the ideas, tools, and strategies that you and I have been discussing?
I would encourage them to go visit www.reverseriskconsulting.com.
Okay, great. I'm Charles Reed. We've been with Mason today. I appreciate you watching. Have a good day.